Despite what we are told in the movie Goodfellas and the book Wiseguy, there is in fact speculation that Billy Batts was not actually a made man. Let's check it out. Welcome to OC Shorts, bringing you detailed historical snapshots of the American Mafia and other organised crime. Feel free to subscribe if you like that sort of thing. Today, we're going to explore whether or not Billy Batts was actually a made man in the Gambino crime family. Due to the fact that at present there is no confirmed photo of the real Billy Batts, I will be using images of Frank Vincent's portrayal of him in the movie Goodfellas throughout this video. In the book Wiseguy by Nicholas Pileggi, based on the life and times of Lucchese crime family associate Henry Hill, we are told that William Billy Batts Bentvena was a made man in the Gambino crime family. The best-selling book states, "One night, right after my arrest for assaulting the wrong guy, we were having a party in Roberts for Billy Batts. Billy had just gotten out of prison after 6 years. We usually gave a guy a party when he got out. Food, booze, hookers. It's a good time. Billy was a made guy. He was with Johnny Gotti from near Fulton Street, and he was hooked up with the Gambinos." This information that Billy Batts was a made man is echoed in the movie Goodfellas, which was of course based on the book Wiseguy. Billy Batts was famously murdered by Tommy DeSimone and Jimmy Burke in 1970. Henry Hill would state, "We had a problem. Billy Batts was untouchable. There has to be an okay before a made man can be killed. If the Gambino people ever found out that Tommy killed Billy, we were all dead. There was no place we could go. They could even have demanded that Paulie whack us himself. Tommy had done the worst possible thing he could have done, and we all knew it. Billy's body had to disappear. We couldn't leave it on the street. There would have been a war. With no body around, the Gotti crew would never know for sure." However, as mentioned, there are in fact indications that William Billy Batts Bentvena was not actually a made man. William Bentvena was born in 1933. In 1959, at the age of 25, William Billy Batts Bentvena was charged with being a minor player in a narcotics smuggling ring that would later be known as the French Connection. He would eventually go to prison in the early 1960s for his small involvement in this narcotics trafficking operation. It is widely known that the books for membership into Cosa Nostra were closed in 1957. And William Billy Batts Bentvena would have been around 23 or 24 in 1957, the year that membership into the American Mafia was stopped for the best part of 2 decades. In the 1950s, there were known induction ceremonies in 1950, 1953, and several between 1954 and 1957. From research conducted by far better historians than myself, there were some 43 mobsters who were inducted into what we now call the Gambino crime family throughout the 1950s. This list included the likes of James Jimmy Brown Failla, Stephen Stevie Coogan Grimalta, Salvatore Toddo Aurello, and Vincent Boozy DeChico. But in all of the research regarding inductions into the American Mafia in the 1950s, William Billy Batts Bentvena's name does not appear. Again, this doesn't mean that Billy Batts wasn't inducted, but it is an interesting point. As mentioned, when the books were closed in 1957, Billy Batts was around 23 or 24 years old. And there were in fact mobsters who were made at a relatively young age in the 1950s, such as Fiore Ciano, who was 27 when he was inducted in 1954 into what we now call the Genovese crime family. But Fiore Ciano had carried out 2 hits on behalf of powerful mobsters before he was inducted in 1954. One killing was for the deported mob boss Charlie Luciano, and another was for then family underboss Vito Genovese. On top of this, Fiore Ciano was connected. He was the nephew of longtime family soldier Joe Valachi. Whereas, in comparison, William Billy Batts Bentvena was a fairly low-level drug dealer, and there is no record of him carrying out any hits of note. Again, this doesn't mean that Billy Batts wasn't inducted, but does add to the case that perhaps he wasn't. There are those who state that there were in fact mobsters who were inducted into the American Mafia after the books were closed in 1957, citing cases where they would be replacing deceased or retired mobsters. However, this appears to be a fallacy. According to FBI files, there were some unauthorized inductions made by the Gambino Crime Family in the 1960s, and allegedly also some in Philadelphia. But it appears that there was only one induction that was officially approved by the Commission in the period between 1957 and 1976, and this involved Nicky Bianco. Nicky Bianco was inducted into the New England-based Patriarca crime family in the early 1960s, and then in around 1965 he was transferred to the Colombo crime family, but he had been living in Brooklyn for several years prior to this. The story of Nicky Bianco's criminal career is fascinating, and I'll cover this at a later date, including his involvement in the Gallo-Profaci War. There are a couple of other mobsters who claim they were inducted when the books were closed. Vincent Cafaro was a Genovese soldier who turned government witness, and he claimed he was inducted in a ceremony in 1974 at the Il Cortile restaurant on Mulberry Street. However, this restaurant did not open until 1975, and it is most likely believed that Vincent Cafaro was inducted in 1976 when the books were reopened. Michael Franzese also states that he was inducted into the Colombo crime family on Halloween night 1975. However, there are multiple discrepancies around his story, which I've covered in 2 previous videos. The links to these are in the comments below. Evidence suggests that Michael Franzese was most likely inducted on Halloween night in 1978. Anyway, the point is that there is no record of Billy Batts being inducted into the Gambino crime family pre-1957, and definitely none after the books were closed that same year. William Billy Batts Bentvena was released from prison in around 1970, and so, as we've established, at this time the books for membership were well and truly closed, and therefore he was not inducted after his release from prison and before his brutal murder at the hands of Tommy DeSimone. Interestingly, in addition, William Billy Batts Bentvena is not listed as a deceased Cosa Nostra member in any of the FBI's lists that they compiled in the 1970s. These lists indicated which made men had passed away. So, this brings up the question, was Henry Hill simply mistaken when he said that Billy Batts was a made man? Or was he lying? As we covered earlier, Henry Hill stated that Tommy DeSimone and Jimmy Burke were concerned about the killing of Billy Batts because he was a made man. And it is often said that Tommy DeSimone was eventually murdered himself due to this unauthorized murder of Billy Batts, who Hill claims was an inducted member of the Gambino crime family. In reality, it is believed that Tommy DeSimone was killed for numerous transgressions, including the Billy Batts murder, and also the killing of Ronald Foxy Gerothe, who was also an associate of John Gotti. Interestingly, there is a blink and you'll miss it line in the movie Goodfellas that provides another theory regarding Billy Batts and his status as a made man. This occurs in the scene when Joe Pesci's Tommy first flies into a rage with Frank Vincent's Billy Batts. The original screenplay states, "Tommy, Motherfucker, jeez. He bought his fucking button, that fake old tough guy. Henry, he's drunk. Tommy, you bought your fucking button, you fake tough guy. This line is essentially Tommy stating that Billy Batts paid money to become inducted into the Gambino crime family. In the 1950s, it was alleged that powerful mobster Frank Scalise, who served for a time as underboss to the family boss Albert Anastasia, was selling memberships into the crime family. Famous mob turncoat Joe Valachi would later testify that there were some mobsters who paid around $40,000 to become a made man. He also stated that there were some who made Frank Scalise a partner in their business, and in return would become inducted into the crime family. Despite what we see in the screenplay for the movie, the book Wiseguy that the film is based on does not mention that Billy Batts purchased his membership. So perhaps it was just a line made up for the film by Nicholas Pileggi and Martin Scorsese, who co-wrote the screenplay. In addition, there are no historical records of William Billy Batts Bentvena being one of the mobsters who purchased his membership. Unlike those who were mentioned in Joe Valachi's testimony, that included the likes of Vincent Jimmy Jerome Squillanti, Jerry Mancuso, Arthur Chink Leo, Carmine Camarado, Salvatore Bonfrisco, and Joseph Jojo Manfredi, amongst several others. And so it appears that the only actual person who stated that Billy Batts was a made man was Henry Hill. And those who are familiar with mob history are aware that his accounts of events aren't always 100% accurate. Anyway, let me know your thoughts in the comments below as to whether you believe that William Billy Batts Bentvena was actually a made man in the Gambino crime family. I hope you found that interesting. Thanks for watching.